Hello friends, very good evening. Welcome to the Hindu analysis by LTX classes. The first article that we are going to discuss today is the op-ed article. The poor state of India's fiscal federalism comes under your General Studies paper 2, Center State Relations, as well as General Studies paper 3, Indian Economy. A very important article from the perspective of mains. There are also several concepts that the author touched, which I will explain in detail. So that will help you in prelims as well. Predominantly, he talks about the poor state of India's fiscal federalism. What is federalism? Federalism is division of powers between center and states. Fiscal federalism is division of financial powers between center and state. And this man is talking about, the author is talking about the asymmetry, the lack of symmetry. What is symmetry? When both of them are at the same level or look the same, then you call them symmetric. When center's powers are so high and the state's finances are so bad compared to center, you call it asymmetric. Today what we have is asymmetric federalism, not symmetric federalism, which means center has more powers than states. The author talks about Jawaharlal Nehru. He talks about Jawaharlal Nehru. Why is he talking about Jawaharlal Nehru here? Look at this. He is referring to Jawaharlal Nehru. Jawaharlal Nehru felt a degree of centralization in fiscal power was required. He felt center needs to be more powerful than states. Why? Only when center is more powerful, center will have more money. Only when they have more money, they can help states which are not performing great. There are some states which are doing great. There are some states which will be doing bad. So you need to help the states who are not doing great. In order to help someone who is not doing great, you need to be more powerful financially. That is one aspect. Another aspect is socio-economic inequalities. In order to reduce socio-economic inequalities, center needs to be empowered with more money. That was the reason he felt it is better to be asymmetric than symmetric. It is better that center has more funds than states, so that center can use the excess funds to correct these inequalities among states and among people, to address the concerns of socio-economic and regional disparities, inequality. It was required to have a degree of centralization, which means center having more financial powers. But that whatever Nehru conceptualized or conceived continued even till today. And today, recently, states have lost their capacity to generate revenue. Why? Because of this new tax system called GST. So we need to understand a bit of GST. And another aspect that centers are facing today is this centrally sponsored schemes. These schemes distorted their expenditure pattern. So we will look at both of them in detail. Why GST is doing bad to states, and centrally sponsored schemes, how they are distorting centers or states' expenditure patterns. So let's understand them in a bit detailed manner and then get back to the article. So earlier, union used to have its own taxes, state used to have its own taxes. There is something called state list, there is something called union list. On the items in union list, union government used to tax. Items in state list, state government used to tax. This is how it used to be before the introduction of GST. GST was introduced in 2007, and DST, one nation, one tax. So there is no distinction of union list and state list as far as taxes are concerned. So all items are same, and among all the goods and services, the only division is GST goods and non-GST goods. Only few were excluded from GST regime, rest all were put under GST regime. Goods like petrol, alcohol, they were not under GST. Many of the goods are under GST today. Now earlier, center used to decide taxes for their items, state used to decide taxes for their items. Now, how much GST on which item? This will be decided by something called GST Council. So GST Council decides what should be the tax. GST Council decides what should be the tax on which item, and whatever money that comes via GST, it will be split between center and state. So this way, states lost their ability to raise taxes. They cannot decide taxes on their own. Earlier they can raise taxes. If at all they wanted to increase their revenue, they could raise. Now it is not in their own hand. So that way they lost their ability to increase revenues via taxes. That is one aspect. The other aspect is centrally sponsored schemes. We will talk about this after some time. So there's a lot more description about that in the article itself. So this article talks about so many issues. So many issues that states are facing today. Today, Indian states are suffering. They have lost their revenue capability because of this GST. They lost their independence. Apart from that, they lost several other things. They are suffering with respect to finances in several other aspects. The other touches upon many such aspects. Let's look at them one by one. So first thing, look at this. He has given some statistics. Earlier, look at this, the ability of states to finance their current expenditures from their own revenues has declined from 69% in 1955-56 to less than 38% in 2019-20. What does that mean? Earlier, all their expenditures, 69% of their expenditures used to be funded from their own revenues. Now only 38% of the expenditure is being funded by their revenues. So they are relying more and more, they are depending more and more on center. Even to meet their expenditure, they are depending more and more on center, which means center is taking a lot of revenue and states' revenue has come down, and states have to depend on center to meet their expenditure. That is the situation today. On one hand, expenditure is going up, but revenues did not go up. He has given some statistics. Even today, 60% of Indian whole expenditure in the country is borne by states. Education, only 15% is spent by center and 85% by state. Health, 82% by states, only 18% by center. That is the situation today. And they lost their taxing rates because of GST, except for petroleum, electricity and alcohol, and remaining it, most of the items are under GST now. And revenue has been stagnant. Stagnant means not growing much. This is the scenario today for states. Next aspect. So very important aspect was mentioned here. Look at this. Finance Commission, especially this 14th Finance Commission, has recommended increase in share of state in central's tax pool. That is called devolution. So I will explain this in detail. So I want you to pay full attention here. Look at this. 14th Finance Commission recommended increase. 14th Finance Commission recommended increase in state's share in divisible pool. Look at this. So center gets a lot of revenue. Center gets a lot of revenue from taxes. From taxes, center gets a lot of revenue. So Finance Commission recommends out of this tax revenue, you have to share certain amount to states. Earlier it used to be 32%. Now with 14th Finance Commission recommendation, the amount has increased to 42%. For example, if the center gets around 100 rupees as tax revenue, they have to share 42 rupees to states as per 14th Finance Commission recommendations. So when you look at it, you will feel good. Yes, now state share from central pool of taxes has gone up. Here the center has played some tricks. So this tax revenue is called divisible pool. Why it is divisible? Because it has to divide the money and share some amount to states. So any money that gets into this system becomes divisible pool, and the center will have to share it with states. So center has started reducing taxes, has started reducing normal taxes and started increasing cess and surcharge. Very important point. Very, very important point. I want you to pay utmost attention here. So you need to understand the difference between tax, cess and surcharge. All three are not same. The income that center gets from tax has to be shared with states. Whereas cess is a special type of tax. The income cess doesn't get into divisible pool. We spoke about divisible pool. The income that center gets from this particular cess will not get into divisible pool. It will go to Consolidated Fund of India, which is the primary account of the central government, and from there it will go to a special account. Why special account? This money has to be spent for a specific purpose. I will give you one example. Example is Swachh Bharat cess. So if the center starts collecting money in the form of Swachh Bharat cess, that money will have to be spent only for Swachh Bharat and for nothing else. So states cannot claim any share in that money. Center has started smartly increasing the number of cesses and reduced number of taxes. Regular tax income has come down. Income from cess has gone up. Surcharge is again another special type of tax. The money that the center gets from surcharge will go to Consolidated Fund of India. This money can be spent for anything. So wherever center wants to spend, they can spend. It need not be shared with states. Which means cess and surcharge, the money from this will not get into divisible pool. It will not go to divisible pool. It will not go. Are you getting this? So this is the trick that center started playing, because of which states are suffering today. So even though Finance Commission is trying to help the states, but center started playing this kind of trick. So non-divisible pool has gone up from 9.43% to 15.7%, and divisible pool is now shrinking. Another aspect is drastic cut in corporate tax. Recently the government has cut down corporate tax. When you cut down corporate tax goes to divisible pool. When you are cutting down corporate tax, divisible pool gets shrunk further. Even GST compensation is also going to end. What is the GST compensation? When they moved from VAT system to GST system in 2007, states wanted some assurance. Now we are getting into a new system. Earlier we used to be in old system. We were getting some X amount of money in VAT system. Now, because we are moving to GST, if our revenues go down, what should we do? Then center said, I will compensate. Okay, whatever money that you used to get from old system, let's assume a 14% annual growth for that. Whatever you were earning in 2016-17, let's assume 14% growth year on year. So you calculate, you earned some X amount in 2016-17, and next year let's assume 1.14 of this X amount, and every year 14% growth. You make a calculation. This is what it used to be in your old system. Now with GST coming in picture, whatever money that you are getting now, if there is a difference, I will compensate. This is the promise that center gave. I will give you one example for one particular year. You will understand it. Let's assume 2016-17, a state was getting 100 rupees in VAT system, earlier system. So they are saying assume 14% growth every year. Let's say next year you should be getting 114 if you are continuing in VAT system. But since you are in GST system now, let's assume actual amount that you got is 108 rupees. So there is a difference of 6 rupees. Now states will say, I used to get 114 in the old system. Now I am only getting 108. So there is a difference of 6 rupees. This 6 will be compensated by center. For how long? For 5 years. which means from 2017 to 2022. Now today it's 2022. No longer the center is going to compensate this. Although states are asking for extension, center has not committed yet. This is another problem that states are facing. So who will compensate? In future, if our revenue is not great, who will compensate? No answer for that question. Next problem is interest rate differential. Interest rate differential. So I will talk about this aspect. Very, very important. There are so many issues that the author is raising. What is this concept of interest rate differential? So look at this. Whenever center or state want money, what will they do? They borrow. They borrow from market. How do they borrow? They issue bonds. What is a bond? Bond is a financial instrument which offers you fixed interest rate, fixed coupon rate. For example, if you are issuing a bond of 10,000 rupees and the coupon rate is 8%, you will get 800 rupees every year. And it also comes with a maturity period. If you are taking a maturity period of 5 years, every year you will get 800, 5 years it will be 4,000. So at the end of 5 years, what happens? You will get 10,000. The investor will get 10,000 plus 4 into 8,000, 4,000. So you will get 14,000. Which means, who is borrowing? Center. Who is giving? The investor. Let's say you, me, any bank or anyone, whoever has money, they can purchase this bond. Purchasing means giving money to governments. Giving money to governments. So this way, whenever they want money, they will issue bonds. They will issue bonds. The bonds issued by the center are called government bonds or GSECs. They are called with different names. Government bonds, etc. The bonds issued by state are called SDLs. State Development Loans. They are called State Development Loans. Another aspect that you need to remember here is center has two options. They can issue bonds for short term, which means less than 365 days or more than 365 days. For states, they can only issue bonds SDLs for more than 365 days. Remember this. The government securities issued by center with time period or maturity period of less than 365 days are called treasury bills. They can be issued for 91 days or 182 days or 364 days. Treasury bills can be issued only by center and not state. Remember this. You need these basics to understand the next statement. So here it is talking about interest rate differential. So what is the meaning of this? When the center and states, they are trying to issue bonds, what happens is, let's say center is issuing a bond. Generally it offers lesser interest rate, let's say 7%. Why? Because center is safe. If you are investing your money, if you are putting your money in central government bond, it is absolutely safe. Central government will not deceive you. It will 100% honor their commitment. So interest rate is low. Because risk is low, interest rate is also low. Whereas when state issues a bond, it might not command same interest rate, because for an average individual, if you ask the average individual, whom will you trust more, central government or state government? Financially, whom will you trust more? Obviously, you will choose center, because it is more powerful, it has more money, it controls whole of country. So center has more financial power compared to states. So center, in terms of investors' mind, offers more security compared to state. So risk with state from the perspective of investor is slightly more. When the risk is more, obviously interest rate will be more. He will expect more. Yes or no? Think about it. To a money lender, two people came. One is a government employee, another person is a daily laborer. So money lender gives money to government employee and charges to, let's assume 15%. Same money lender, while giving money to the daily laborer, will ask 24% or 36%. Why? Because there is higher risk. When the risk is more, you will expect more return. Similarly, compared to center, states are seen to be more risky, so interest rate is generally more. Whenever they issue a bond, investors expect more interest, so interest rate will be more. So that is what he is talking about. So this money that states, let's assume states are getting money at 10% interest rate. Let's say they got some 30,000 crores, and this money they will not spend immediately, right? They will not spend this money immediately. So they will need to spend it over a period of, let's say, 6 months. Instead of keeping this money in their own account, what do states do? They will invest this money in treasury bills. Treasury bills issued by central government. Treasury bills are, I have already told you, for 91 days and 182 days. And central government offers only 7% or 8%. Look at this. Now states are borrowing at higher interest rate and temporarily investing at lower interest rate, because central government T-bills don't offer much. So they are losing money. That is what the author is trying to say here. Because of this fiscal mismanagement, money borrowed at higher interest rate and they are investing in short treasury bills at lower interest rate. In sum, the union government is gaining at the expense of states by exploiting these interest rate differentials. That is what the author is saying here. The next point the author talks about is about this centrally sponsored schemes. So let's try to understand a bit about them. I am using sticky note. So whenever I want to write something, I will use this sticky note. Look at this. So you have states here, you have center here. Whenever center wants to help states, assist or help, it can give grants, which is money, obviously money. Apart from what Finance Commission recommends, center also gives excess money to states in the form of grants. So you also call it central assistance. So let's assume center is giving 1,000 rupees to states. When states get 1,000 rupees from center, states can spend it on anything. They can devise their own schemes to help their people. So they have freedom here. Now what the center is doing, instead of giving money directly, it is giving money in the form of schemes, which is centrally sponsored schemes. What is a centrally sponsored scheme? So there is a scheme in which center and states will share the burden. Center and state will share the burden. It is generally center 90% and state 10%. There are some schemes like that, and some in which center shares 60%, state share 40%. In some cases it is 75, 25, 80, 20. So they will have to share the burden in this manner. So what is the problem with centrally sponsored schemes? Two aspects. One, states are not getting money directly. They are getting money in the form of a scheme, which means this money has to be spent towards one particular scheme. So state is losing freedom. It cannot decide. Center decides where to spend. State will only implement it. Centrally sponsored schemes are implemented by states. Remember this. They are implemented by states. As an implementing agency, it doesn't have freedom. Center will decide on which scheme it has to be spent. Center will decide the objective. State is only an implementing agency. So it doesn't have the freedom. It doesn't have the freedom to spend the money given by center. One aspect. Second aspect, apart from that, it has to match. It has to give a matching grant. If center is giving 60%, you have to give 40%. If the center is giving 80%, you have to give remaining 20%. So it has to allocate money from its own finances. It has to allocate money from its own revenue, and the money is given by center. Again, it has to spend on the particular scheme. Here the states are losing freedom. They are not able to decide where to spend the money. Center decides and state will have to merely implement the scheme, nothing else. This is where the author is saying states are losing the freedom. They are completely losing the freedom. In general, they are spending around 25% to 40% as matching grants at the expense of their priorities. Look at this, priorities. Now they cannot decide where to spend that money. Center will decide, you will have to follow it. They are losing freedom, they are losing their revenue also, because they have to allocate some money out of their revenue for these schemes. This is a big problem. And the author is also saying it is the schemes conceived by states that have proved to be beneficial to the people, that have contributed to social development. He is saying states have a better pulse of the people. States understand people in a better manner. Consequently, they come out with better schemes compared to center. He is talking about some examples. See, this Employment Guarantee Act came in Maharashtra first, and that was implemented at the national level. Similarly, midday meal scheme came in Tamil Nadu first. That was implemented by central government later. Local governance came in Karnataka and Kerala first. Then it was implemented later on. School education was focused more in Himachal Pradesh first, and then later center started focusing. So most of the times it is the states who have come out with innovative schemes, and centers simply copied them later. So states have a better pulse, pulse of the people. So when they have more money, they can devise better schemes. That is what the author is saying. Next aspect is this. Look at this. He is saying, why should there be a centrally sponsored scheme on an item that is in the state list? So in our constitution, Schedule 7 provides 3 lists: union list, state list, and concurrent list. On the items in state list, why should center provide funds? Why should there be a scheme on state list? That is one question. Similarly, why should state share the expenditure on a scheme on the union list? For example, you are coming out with a scheme, centrally sponsored scheme on a union list. Center will give some 75%, state will have to give 25%. For a union list item, why should states spend? First question. For a state list item, why is center coming into picture? Why don't you give money? We will do it, right? Leave it to state. They can do whatever they want. First of all, center is getting into state list and is also asking states to spend money for union list. That is the problem today. Right? So he is also giving one example. Health is on the state list, but unfortunately union is coming out with a scheme and it is pushing the scheme onto states. Even schemes like states like Tamil Nadu and Kerala were already doing better. Again you are coming out with your own scheme and pushing it onto states to implement, forcing them to implement. So they are losing their freedom, they are losing their autonomy. They cannot decide what to do with their money. They will have to allocate some money to that central sector scheme. This is one problem. And the last problem that author is talking about is inequality. So he is talking about inequality among people, because initially we were talking about two issues. First thing, states. The second thing is regional disparities between states, and the other one is inequalities. If you look at the World Inequality Report of 2022, who issues this? Who releases World Inequality Report? It is released by World Inequality Lab based in Paris. World Inequality Lab based in Paris. They released this World Inequality Report. It estimates that ratio of private wealth to national income increased from 290% in 1980 to 555% in 2020. One of the fastest such increases in the world. It is talking about this concept. Look at this chart. Private wealth to income ratios in emerging countries 1980 to 2020, and India. This is the chart for India. So it used to be around 290% in 1980. Now it is in 2020 it became around 550% for India. So what is this private wealth to income ratios? It's been clearly given here. Look at this. Private wealth. What is private wealth? Is the sum of all financial and non-financial assets net of debts held by private sector. So all wealth, which means all the assets minus their debt, that is your private wealth. And income is your national income, which is your GDP. So here national income are your GDP, and you have private wealth there. It used to be 290% earlier, now it is 550%, which means private wealth is so much more than GDP. GDP is only 1 year's income, right? What is GDP? Total amount of goods and services produced in an economy. in 1 year. And private wealth is overall assets, overall wealth. The problem here is private wealth is going up. What is the problem here? When private wealth is going up, it's a good sign, right? People are earning more money. That is why they are saying the nation is becoming rich, but the government is becoming poor. The government is becoming poor and the nation is becoming rich. Nation is full of people. So people are becoming richer, but the country as a whole is becoming poorer. So compared to GDP, which is the country's income, country's yearly income, private people's wealth is much more. Earlier it used to be 290%, now it is 550% of the GDP. It has grown too much. It has grown too much. So what is the implication of that? What is the implication of that? When government has more money, so people are wealthy but the government is poor. What is the problem with this? When government is rich, the government can spend that money for poor people. When people are rich, when I am saying people are rich, not all people are rich, right? Only the wealthy ones, they are rich. Poor remains poor. Look at this. The poorest half of population has less than 6%. We are talking about wealth. But the poorest half, out of, let's say there are 100 people in the economy, 50% of them has only 6% of the total wealth. 50% of population has only 6%. Whereas the top 10% of the population has 2/3 of it. Top 10% has 2/3 of revenue, and this 50% of poor people, they have only 6% of revenue. That is the problem. Another issue is India has a very poor record on taxing its rich. India is not taxing its rich people. India's tax to GDP ratio has been one of the lowest in the world. What is tax to GDP ratio? All tax revenue by GDP. This is your tax to GDP ratio. It is among the lowest. What is the meaning of this? When tax revenue to GDP is lowest, which means tax revenue in India is not much. It is less, which means we are not taxing our rich people much. We are not taxing them much. Look at it, it's around 17%. Tax to GDP ratio is around 17%. So when you have more taxes, government will have more money. When the government has more money, they can spend that money for infrastructure. They can spend that money for development, infrastructure and several things. In India, the tax revenue is not much, because of which development is also not great. Right? Whereas in emerging economies, it is 21%. Developed economies, it's around 34%. India, it is just 17%. World Bank says it has to be minimum 15%. World Bank says tax to GDP ratio has to be minimum of 15%. We are just around that. But in developed economies, it's around 34%. Only when you are able to tax the rich people more, you can use that money to help the poor people. You can use that money to build infrastructure and build the economy more. That's what the author is saying. But in India, what happens? Instead of taxing the rich, we tax the poor. So we have two taxes, right? I want you to pay full attention here. We have two taxes. One is direct tax, other one is indirect tax. Indirect tax. So what is direct tax? Your corporate tax as well as income tax. What is indirect tax? Your GST. Your GST. So how do you differentiate direct tax and indirect tax? You take a person, you take the example of income tax. The tax is charged on his income. So incidence, the tax is charged on his income, and the impact is also on the same person. When the incidence and impact, both of them are on the same person, you call it direct tax. You call it direct tax. So income tax is a direct tax. Similarly, corporate tax, which is charged on the profits of corporates, again is a direct tax. This is one aspect. What is indirect tax? You take the example of soap. The government has increased the tax rate on soap. So the tax is charged on soap. Tax is charged on soap, which means incidence is on soap, but the impact is on the consumer. Impact is on the consumer, because the manufacturing company will increase the price of soap, because the government has increased the tax rate on soap, manufacturing company will immediately increase, the impact will be borne by the consumer. That is why it is indirect. The government is not directly taxing the person, it is increasing the tax on these goods, and because of which the consumer is made to suffer. Here the consumer is made to suffer directly. Here the employee or the companies are made to suffer directly. Here it is indirectly. That is the reason it is called indirect tax. This is the reason it is called direct tax. Now the problem is direct tax is progressive. Indirect tax is regressive. Why? Very direct tax is good. Indirect tax is bad. Why? When direct taxes go up, who will be at pain? Employees. Employees means they already have money, they already have financial security, or companies. Companies only, the companies who are getting profits, they will be taxed. So people who are doing well are paying more out of their profits or their income to the government. When indirect taxes go up, what happens? The poor is going to suffer. So your fruits, your vegetables, your milk, recently GST on milk has gone up. GST on milk has gone up. So all these things will become expensive and poor will pay the price for it. You might ask, sir, it is the same for rich also. But for rich, it doesn't matter. If a milk packet costs 5 rupees or 10 rupees or 15 rupees, it doesn't matter to him. But for poor, it matters a lot. That is why indirect taxes affect the poor more than the rich. Rich doesn't worry about petrol price. The rich person doesn't worry about milk packet price. Only the poor person worries more about it. Unfortunately, in India, if you see, indirect tax forms 56% of our total tax revenue. Instead of relying on direct taxes, the government is relying on indirect taxes to increase its revenue. It is reducing direct taxes, it is reducing corporate tax, so it is helping the companies, but it is increasing indirect taxes and it is making the poor man suffer more. That is the problem in India today. Look at this. It slashed corporate tax from 35% to 25%, whereas it also sold several public sector assets. They are selling their companies, they are selling their land, but ultimately they are making the poor pay for it. This is the problem that India is facing today. This is the problem with asymmetric fiscal federalism. The author is finally saying, if there was anything that alleviated poverty or reduced inequality or improved well-being of people, they were all time-tested schemes of state government. Only state government schemes were able to reduce the poverty and reduce inequality and improve the well-being of people. This is what author is saying. So he is asking the center to empower states. Give them more money, give them more powers. Let them spend. Let them do what is best for the people. That is what the author is urging the central government through his editorial. So we looked at several issues that states are facing today. I hope you have made notes out of it. Because of my schedule issues, I am unable to do more articles today. So I will add important articles from today to my tomorrow's analysis. I hope you won't mind. Take care. Bye-bye.